Okay, good afternoon, everyone. We are here at the candy factory, enjoying this beautiful weather, and are happy to have 𝗟𝗲𝗀𝗍𝗲 with us today. She's had a 40-year career in HR, resource management, and leadership development. She's coached and guided organizational leaders in performance improvement, leadership effectiveness, talent acquisition, and onboarding. She is currently an adjunct professor for 2 local colleges, teaching both graduate and undergraduate work. She's got her BA in performance management and organizational dynamics. I challenge you to say that 3 times quickly. And she has her master's in organizational leadership. We are delighted to have 𝗟𝗲𝗀 as a member of the SCORE team and also here today to talk to us about HR resources and how to hold on to people once you hire them.
Yeah.
So without further ado.
Okay, thank you, Jerry, for that kind introduction. And thank you for people joining us online, and for Nick who has joined us in person. And thank you to the Candy Factory, Leanne and Jason, for having me, and for SCORE, obviously, as well, for supporting this workshop. Just a few quick things. I know it's a small group, and I tend to do these somewhat informally anyway, more like a conversation and a little bit of learning and information sharing. I want to, before I launch into the actual presentation, though, ask, again, I'm just accustomed to doing this as a presenter, audio check, people can hear us okay. Nick, you can hear me okay. Everybody online can hear okay. Great. And then this is just part of my repertoire as an instructor and as a facilitator, but if you need a break, you need to step out of the room or offline or off video, please do what you need to do. If you need to answer a phone call, you can step out of the session to do that. We're all super busy and want to be respectful of the demands on people's time as we go through. So I want to start out, I like to know what people already know about what we're going to talk about. So
I'm not sure I understand.
Well, I hope I can clear that up for Siri. All right, I'm trying to advance the slides and I'm not sure why. Let's see. Sometimes. There we go. All right. Are you, in terms of recruiting and especially retention, our focus today, do you consider yourself a guru? You've got it. You have success stories that you can share with us later. Feel really comfortable with retention efforts, keeping the employees the good people that you find. So if you're on the chat, you can feel free to weigh in. I've got a couple more questions. Maybe you're not a guru. Maybe you find yourself fair to middling or more like muddling with this. And you really could use some pointers on what you need to do. And finally, don't be concerned if this is you. Gosh, 𝗟𝗲𝗀, I haven't a clue. Please help me. And in today's labor market, I'm not surprised that some people feel that way. That what is it that I need to do, to keep people on board once I find them. So I'd like to share, I always like to share a little bit of background in what I call, from an HR perspective, fun facts. So turnover, people coming and going, is costly for you. You probably already know that. I looked up statistics for small business turnover, and it's telling me that for an hourly employee, if you're hiring an hourly employee and they turn over quickly after you've hired them, it's probably going to cost you about $1,500. You've got to put another ad, on the online boards, perhaps. You need to post the job somewhere. You need to retrain somebody else that you find eventually down the road. It's costing your business, it's costing you. The other thing I like to share with people is that people leaving your company, your business, is not always about the money. So we'll talk a little bit about this later. I don't want your thinking to be limited about, I can't pay people anymore, so therefore I'm not going to attract talent or ultimately be able to keep them. retention always starts with good recruiting. Go slow to go fast here. So you should have good hiring strategies in place, and that means you need to get really skilled at interviewing. And talk a little bit more about that as we go forward too. SHRM, the Society for Human Resources Management, does surveys all the time, and they've asked employees, after a week on the job, how do you feel about it? And those employees have said, according to this survey, 97% of them, not sure if I took the right job here. Now, I wish SHRM would do a survey of employers and ask them, after a week on the job, did you find the right person?
Right.
Did someone else show up for the job? How are they doing? So I'm sure that the statistics might be similar. So that's a little concerning that you go through this whole process of finding people and then they turn around and say, I'm not so sure I belong here. So how do we ensure that up front? We have to be really follow our due diligence when it comes to hiring so we get the right person to begin with. And then I'm going to assume that small business people, you have limited resources. You probably don't have quote unquote money to throw at turnover or at employees demanding more. But there are so many things that you can do that aren't going to cost you anything or are only going to cost you a little bit. So we'll talk about those. So what am I going to talk about today, or what will we talk about today? There's this concept out in the corporate world called the employee experience. You may have heard this term, and this impacts your retention, and it's really driven by your business culture. And whether there is a connection and whether that meshes with the person that you've hired and what you want to accomplish with the role that you're hiring for. So what is the employee experience? We'll talk a little bit about that. And it's really, how do people feel about the job when they walk through the door every day? Is it positive? Is it good? Do they want to keep coming back? And the thing that impacts that greatly, their engagement and willingness to stay, is the business culture. I also want to talk about what are some actual practical activities that you can engage in that you may not be engaging in now that build better retention. What are some, again, strategic, tactical things that you can do, actual activities that will help retain your people? And then finally, I would love to hear from the people present about the experiences you've had with retention. Has it gone well? What are some things that have perhaps allowed you to engage and keep people? Or conversely, are there some things that have happened that, gosh, I didn't even see this coming, and I don't know really why they've left. And what can we do to mitigate that? Have that happen less often for you? So, okay, I want to talk about business culture. What is it? What is business culture? Business culture? Anybody in the room or anybody online want to chat and say, give me your thoughts on what is business culture?
How you behave, like the vibe of the room, if you will.
There's a vibe. It's not written down anywhere, is it?
Right.
There's no playbook about this is our business culture that you hand out. It's more a feeling, a vibe. Yeah, I like that description. What contributes to the vibe, Jason?
Well, how you treat people, just generally, like if you're kind, if you're friendly, happy, if you're able to be casual as well as get things done, right? There's balance there.
Yeah, I would build on that and just say like leadership, right? So it's the tone and the attitude of leadership, as well as other coworkers shape the culture of the organization and their approach or thoughts of the company, the values.
Yeah, I think it starts at the top. I really, to your point, I think a lot of the culture starts with whoever's in charge of this, the organization, and how they shape that, and how they treat people.
the top has a huge influence on it, but it's all the things that you described, and they're all very interpersonal, they're all very human, and they're sometimes a little hard to pin down.
Uh-huh.
And what I always found interesting is how employees describe the culture versus how the leadership describes the culture. Sometimes there's a disconnect there. So it's always good to have a pulse on your business culture and what you want it to be and how you're shaping and molding it through all the things you talked about. Even if it's just you have a culture.
Right.
You know, and it goes back to leadership style and if you're hiring people, what's the chemistry between you and those people that you hire, compatibility, what's the pressure and pace of business, environment that people come into. I mean, it's all those things that you described. And I emphasize this because you want the people that you hire to fit that culture.
Mhm.
You want them to feel comfortable because if they do, that drives the employee experience. How they feel about it. And I know might feel a little squishy, you know, to some people like, you know, hey, I got a business to run here and I got money to make. You know, why am I considering all this sort of intangible, you know, psycho fuzzy stuff? But I'll say that this is foundational to keeping and engaging with people. So knowing what a good fit is, being able to describe and articulate that is part of your brand. And it's part of talent acquisition and attraction. People look for that. What's it going to be like if I go to work for the candy factory? And a lot of them are going to do the research and they're going to look online, you know, social media and other things, put that kind of information out there. So again, we talked about the employee experience. Can't emphasize how important it is to be aware of that. And then you leverage this. This is what makes you special. This is why people hopefully want to come and do it and stay. So, assuming that you have found a good hire, the good hires, you want to keep them, right? You want them to stay. And so I take a little side journey here, and I want to talk about something called motivational factors. Anybody heard that term? Motivational factors. In the HR realm, where we get very excited about this stuff, it's really about what are those things that drive people's performance? What makes them come to work every day, besides earning a living, which, you know, is a given. So there are consultants and organizations out there that do surveys all the time, asking American workers, what are your top 10 motivators? Now, let me just tell you, when they're asked and they publish these surveys, and you can go out and Google this, pay is number 5. The paycheck, fair pay, competitive pay, number 5. It's in there, no doubt about it. Don't want to underestimate money here for a moment. But what do you suppose is the top 1, 2, or 3? What are people saying?
Fulfillment, I would say, would have to be pretty high up there. You got to feel like you're accomplishing something when you
Purpose, fulfillment. I'm contributing. I do something valuable. The work, no matter what I'm doing, whatever walk of life I'm in, it matters. That is huge for many, many people. It's intrinsic. It's something that I want. You work 50 plus years of my life, which is a statistic. Sorry, Nick. And perhaps people online, then I want it to be meaningful. I want to create value, and I want to be acknowledged for that value by my manager, my owner, my boss. I want to feel appreciated. That will show up in the top 3. All the years that I've been, monitoring this kind of stuff, there it is all the time.
How about fun on the job? How about enjoyment of the job?
Fun will show up a lot too. I like my coworkers, they're like a family, and we play hard and we have fun. So that is another key thing. And when we talk further about some of the environmental things you can do to reward and recognize, fun is a big one. So consider that. So think about how powerful a genuine and authentic thank you feels. Do we all as human beings in our work get enough of those? Attaboys, attagirls. Do we get enough?
Yeah, we're always thanking our team. It makes a big difference.
Yeah.
Doesn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah, it really does.
like throughout the day.
That is important to people. And how much does it cost you?
Yeah.
Right.
Nothing. But yet I used to ask leaders all the time, why not do it? Busy, hectic, I meant to. It's left behind a lot,
Mhm.
but it really, really, really is important. So when I talk to you about what are some things that help retain, acknowledging good performance and appreciation and thanking isn't all that you have to do, but it sure is important. And it makes a difference. And people will say, I have a great job, but you know what I really love about it is my manager recognizes when I do a great job in my performance. So I think that's really important. Now, let me talk a little bit about pay, because I don't want to underestimate the impact that pay has on us. But how long is the happy factor when I get a pay raise or a bonus or an unexpected windfall? How long does the happiness around that last?
Trying to think of my own experience as an employee. I mean, yeah, you kind of get used to it pretty quick, I would say. Maybe a paycheck or two,
Yeah,
and by the third one, it's
Yeah.
sort of routine and you're spending all of it.
yeah, that's right. You are expanding the lifestyle to fill the paycheck. That's what people do.
Right.
And what's the thing about money? Will anybody ever raise their hand and say, Jason, I have enough. You don't have to give me any more. We always want more money, don't we? That's a human condition too. I mean, that's most of us. Some of us are very money motivated, but most of us, there's a short shelf life with money. So again, don't limit your thinking as a small business owner to the only thing that's going to keep this person here is more money. It's probably not going to keep them. So keep that in mind. And if you have employees now, and some of them you've assessed as high performers, what is driving them? Do you know? I used to ask senior leaders that all the time. Used to love their reaction because this is what they would do. Fiddle with their pen. They didn't know.
Yeah.
And I don't blame them. It wasn't their fault. You need to ask, why do you do the job that you do? And the most remarkable, I'll just share a quick example. The most remarkable example, and this has stayed with me for 30 years. Long while ago, I worked as a human resources director in a retirement community that had a long-term care facility, which we used to call nursing homes.
Yeah.
Now they call it a skilled care center. It's still a nursing home. And we hired a lot of CNAs. Does everybody here know what a CNA is? What kind of work does a CNA do?
Not very nice.
Not very, that's right, Jerry.
They're in it.
It's very hands-on. Not a job I could do.
Yeah.
And the pay is really not commensurate with the kind of care that CNAs are expected to give, in my opinion. This was 1994. This CNA was probably making about $9 an hour, back then, but she had worked for us for 15 years. And I'm like, why? Why do this job for that many years? A job that most people would say, nope, not for me. And she pointed to the mission statement that was hanging on the wall in my office. And she said, I make that happen every day. And I still get goosebumps when I think of that story, because I was curious, why would someone want to do this job? And here, go back to what we talked about a minute ago about finding meaning and purpose in the work that you do. It was so powerful for her. So I tell that story as a little bit of an inspiration when you think maybe I can't pay the top dollar, or maybe the role isn't as sexy and glamorous as some other jobs. that if you know what drives people's performance in those roles, and that's a huge unlock.
Mm.
You know, find that. And I think part of the interviewing process should include what drives your high performance, what motivates you in the workplace, and know that even before you bring them in. So, you know, consider that.
Be an interesting question to
That's
ask
a
there.
good question to ask, yeah.
Yeah.
Good one.
You know, let them share. Because if they talk about motivational factors that aren't present in your workplace, you know, maybe that resume or application goes to the bottom of the pile. So again, just things, you know, things to think about. So that was my soapbox on motivational factors, but I think it's really foundational to know this and think about it.
Yeah.
So let me talk about some more practical things. What are some things that you need to do? So you hire somebody, and it's the first day on the job. What do you do on that first day?
We do an onboarding and shadowing. I normally sit down and go over the employee handbook and introduce them to everyone, get them comfortable, get them introduced to the technology. It's basically like an introduction.
Yeah, and I would call it orientation.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, so you know, you sheep dip them and, you know, everything important to know on that first day. Every business, and especially every small business, is going to do this a little differently. So, you know, I've thrown some things here on the slide. You know, you're gonna have policies and rules, behaviors that you expect of people, customer interactions. You're gonna describe all of that. If it's a safety sensitive job, I don't know, Nick, if you have some safety concerns in your
We just
shop.
gotta make sure we read the labels. Make sure we're remarking all the labels, because some of the chemicals are corrosive, some of them are not as bad, but we still have to make sure. But when they start paying that with the renewed labels and stuff, put them on bottles and stuff.
So people need to know, one, that this is a hazard, and two, here's what you need to know about it.
Mm.
So you're making sure that people are safe, you know, the things that you share. You're sharing values and goals and mission, and you're also sharing performance expectations. What does success look like here? What are good results? So all of that is usually in your first day, and I would call that orientation, introduction, you know, to the workplace. And again, as small business people, it may not be as formal as a large corporation, but there should be some methodology or some process that you go through to ensure that you cover everything that they need to know on that first day. Maybe something simple like a checklist, but there is some interaction and people understand. So beyond orientation, are there other things that you do? Or you set them free and go forth and produce. Get us some good results here. I like to talk about onboarding here. And for me, onboarding is different from orientation. Onboarding is longer. You know, in a lot of jobs, it might be 90 days. At a higher level position, it might be 6 months or even longer.
Yeah.
Onboarding is a planned, documented process. So you might include. Cover that. What are the things that this person needs to do over time to demonstrate that they can be successful? And for them to have a good employee experience, and for you to assess their fit and whether or not they can do this job and get good results. So these activities, you know, training, introduction to customers, job shadowing, that sort of thing, all kinds of meetings, activities all delineated and documented that the employee is responsible for, but you're also monitoring. And you're providing feedback and letting them know how they're doing, because you want to see a progression of upskilling. And you want to be sure that they're really worthy of working for you.
Yeah, small businesses, we bring somebody in and there's not a lot of extra time and a lot of extra people to do whatever it is we hire them for. So this makes all the sense in the world. My question is, how often should we formally sit down with that individual and say, and review this? Okay, you're talking about 90 days, but you don't want to wait 90 days to tell somebody, we think you're doing a lousy job. We think you're doing a great job. So what would be your recommendation in terms of how often? I mean, it doesn't have to take 15, 20 minutes is all you need. That's what this is me. I'm telling you, I'm asking you, sorry. Anyway, that's the question. How often?
Okay, so you don't want the orientation and onboarding to be a drive-by, right?
Right.
There has to be connection throughout this whole thing. And I think we covered all this. So perfect segue, Jerry.
Hey, that's
Let's
the
talk.
reason I'm here.
Thank you. Let's talk about performance evaluation.
Yeah, okay.
And that you may not work for or own a business that has a formal appraisal process in place yet. But, and as you grow, you should be thinking about this, but in the meantime, how often are you providing feedback to this person during the onboarding and beyond? Just generally, maybe it's a 5-year employee who's been doing well. How often is he or she getting feedback?
My
It's a real
experience,
question.
I know my experience with a bigger company is those that have been there for 5 years would normally get a pretty formal evaluation once a year. Those that joined recently, it would be dependent on the job every 90 days to 6 months. And then after that, it would be a yearly process.
Yearly,
But that's
touch
a
base.
lot of people I'm talking about. Bigger company.
Yes, and it sounds like my experience in corporate world as well.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna say something radical about feedback, that I believe feedback on some level should occur all the time, every day even. Even if it's just a quick, hey, nice work today, or hey, we need to sit down tomorrow and talk about a few things. Be prepared for that. So often, I always know where I stand. Jerry's right. You don't wait till the 89th day to say, this isn't working out. So unfair. So feedback frequent, course correct. If somebody is off the rails a little bit, you want to get them right back on. And managers will do this all the time. They will delay. In fact, that's not always a comfortable conversation. Like, she's having a bad day, tomorrow I'll be better. And next thing you know, weeks have gone by and it hasn't been better. And you're like, oh my gosh, I need to address this. You don't want to let things drift. But also remember, this is such an opportunity to do that acknowledgement and that thanking. We see progress. We're glad you're on board and part of the team. And then you think about the employee experience, getting that feedback. I feel really good about being here. Coaching is a little different than feedback. I won't go into any lengthy explanation here, but it tends to be a little more formal, where you're sitting down privately and you're assessing reality. And that's a two-way conversation. What's real for them? What's real? What are you observing? You're sharing. Are there any barriers if there's performance problems? You're talking through all that kind of thing. Or you're, again, advising them in a formal way that they're doing well. People feel really good. And then annual reviews, or the type of review you might need to promote somebody or to give somebody a merit increase, to justify those kinds of decisions. So hopefully that all makes sense. So these are important things that you wanted to have in place, because these will help you keep good people doing all these things. And then finally, circling back to rewards and recognition, you might sense that there's a theme here. That this is something, that I just think is so important. How do you know people's motivational factors?
For me, it's, you got to know the individual.
You have
to know.
ask.
Oh, that's too easy.
Ask in the interview, but you also, assess as they go through their onboarding, their job. and become seasoned employees. Managers will put together all these grand activities and
Yeah.
events, only to find out that the employees couldn't care less.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Pizza Friday? I don't even like pizza. That kind of thing. So misdirected, heart in the right place, but not really meaningful to the people. So that's what you want to make sure of. There are motivational factors that are common with all of us as human beings, and then there's some that are unique and distinct for each person.
Mhm.
So knowing that several things probably drive my performance, and to the extent that you can find commonalities, you put together a a reward or recognition program that speaks to them. And, okay, I know this is a good old fashioned paperback book. Can you tell what generation I'm from? This book was published in 1994 by Bob Nelson. And hey, it's an Amazon Prime Day. You might be able to find it used for a couple bucks if you're interested. But what he does, 1,001 ways for real, to reward and recognize people. The thing I love about this one is so many creative and fun ideas.
Mhm.
Large companies, small companies, things that you can do. If appropriate, you read through and it's, oh yeah, that would be great for us. It's I paid $16.95. But again, this is probably worth, or something like this, if you were thinking, well, gosh, what should we do to really amp this up? So personalizing motivational things is important. What would they enjoy? What would they like? So let me share just a few things here, as we move through. Can't emphasize enough, and I've said it, that hiring the right people to begin with is really key. Hone up and refine your interviewing skills if necessary. If you're not doing behavioral-based interviewing, Nick, we talked about that at the last session, but I don't know, Ian and Jason, and those of you online, if you're familiar with behavioral-based interviewing. But this behavioral-based interviewing goes deeper than just technical expertise and experience to who the person really is. And you all probably know that you've hired people that you thought were great, only to have them show up on the job and not be so great. So do some research on that if you're not already doing that. Take a look at your orientation, onboarding, your performance review activities, and make adjustments or implement them if you don't have them. And then get to know people's motivational factors and put some things in place that they find value in.
One of the things we were doing on the second one about orientation, onboarding, and performance was talk to an employee after 6 months and say to them, what did we miss? We did this orientation, this onboarding, but now you've had 6 months to do your job. What is it that we missed to help you get started in the right direction? It's interesting. There's some of the comments you get.
Yeah.
And there's no better person to ask, and you can't wait. I mean, you can't wait a year and a half, 2 years to ask them. Too late. About 6 months.
Yeah. Nip any potential dissatisfiers
Yeah.
or concerns
Right.
in the vibe right there. Yeah, that's great, Jerry. Thank you. So a few other things that I'll share. I'm guessing that people here already know that the young workers coming into the work, younger, I should say. What's behind millennials?
Gen Z.
Gen Z.
Gen
Yeah.
Z,
Gen
up
Z.
to 20, age 26 nowadays,
Oh my
Yeah.
gosh.
in that area,
And it's
late 2020.
then after that, before that.
What's after Gen Z?
Yeah.
It's even younger than Gen Z.
Yeah, Gen little kid.
Gen child.
Okay, I was just checking to make sure you know.
One thing that I read consistently is how eager they are for growth and development. And that might feel daunting to a small business, but growth and development doesn't have to be expensive. It doesn't have to be some offsite massive training effort. It can be something as simple as a stretch assignment or letting them, job shadow somebody who has particular expertise, or even assigning some self-study. But I love their eagerness. I mean, they come in the door day one and day two, they want to be the CEO. I want some of that energy, like, wow. But again, can you help them grow into new roles? What are some things you can put in place to help? Can be a huge motivational factor for them. It is important that you know that your pay is competitive. That can be a dissatisfier. So do you know what roles are and positions are paying in, the marketplace, especially in a tight labor market? And make adjustments if you can and need to. Are there opportunities, and this isn't true of every business, but are there opportunities to build in flexible schedules? Life balance is a huge thing for everybody. So are there any ways to help enhance someone's life balance between their busy personal lives and their busy work lives? And then, wow, what's happened post-COVID? Everybody wants to work from home.
Right.
Again, that's not for everybody. But if there's opportunities for someone to do remote work from time to time, or on a snow day or whatever, that can be a big boost for you. So consider those things. So, what has worked for you? Or what hasn't worked for you? Or what questions do you have as we wrap up?
We've shifted our application process, which I think has been very helpful, and the interview process. So after a tour of the facility, I take this person that we're interviewing and usually one of my community managers, and we actually go offsite. So we go to a coffee shop or just away from the facility,
Sure.
where you can feel like you're having more of a conversation. So it's less of an interview and more of like a conversation. And I have found that the last few times I've done that, we've brought on like higher quality team members, just feeling like you can make a connection. And it's like when you're having a conversation outside of a conference room, people will open up, they'll be more vulnerable, as well as like we were able to determine pretty quickly in one of our in the interview process for one of the positions, those who were maybe good candidates and who weren't, by just having more of a conversation. So yeah, it's been better for us. Yeah.
So you've been able to separate those that could be against those that really you don't want because of additional conversations and more informal approach. That's interesting.
Yeah, like how do they react in that kind of situation?
So how many interviews do you have before you hire somebody?
Well, we only if they filled out the application, which is kind of lengthy, and we ask questions like, what's your superpower and what core value do you align with? And it makes them have to do some research. They don't get an interview if they don't, because we will get like an email or something.
What of our core
Yeah.
values? Go find them.
Yeah, so you have to,
So you have to
look through this
put
site.
them to your website
yes,
if they haven't already gone there.
right. And all of the information is
Good.
actually on the top of the page. They would have to have read the information.
So
That's pretty good.
You have to go to the website, but
Yeah.
you could.
That's pretty good.
So questions like that, instead of, because for our positions, we can pretty much train as long as someone is motivated. They don't need to have a college degree or anything like that.
Yeah.
But we do have an area for them to submit their resume as well. But the questions are very like, what are your strengths? What are your weaknesses, superpowers, things like that? What do you think you could bring to the culture, like to the space?
Those are great questions.
Yeah, and then taking them off site, it's just, we just hired someone, actually, we just had an interview. And she even said, she's like, I really appreciated the application process, even before we hired her. She's like, it was very different from what I've experienced in the past, like in other employers. And so for us, it gives us a little more of a peek into who they are, but it also gives them a little bit more of an understanding of who we are.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're establishing the culture right there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Saying we want to go to a coffee shop, we want to sit down, do what they order, are they comfortable having that conversation? Because about, 90% of being an employee at a place like this is hospitality. And it's about engaging with members, and it's about talking with people and feeling comfortable,
Yes.
joking around and enjoying, just a casual conversation. Hard to do it in a conference room when you feel like you're in the Senate
You're in
hearing.
that
Kinda like
interview,
Yeah.
situation,
Yeah.
which is naturally stressful. It allows you to see that person in a more
Yes.
natural kind of
Yeah.
environment, and there's so many different cues that you can pick up
Right,
on in that situation that you might not in a more formal interview. I love that idea. And I will say that candidates, you probably found, I think you may have alluded to it, appreciate that too. That's an investment of you as a potential employer in them,
Yeah,
and making sure that there is a mutual match. And a lot of people nowadays appreciate that a lot.
yeah, I've also started to include the other team members in the interview process,
That's good.
because they're the ones gonna be working
work
more closely with them, and so getting their feedback afterwards. So like, they get sent the application once it's submitted to review. We review the candidate together, then we have the interview, and then afterwards, it's like, okay, what did you feel like? What were some of the positive or negatives about that interview? And getting that, because it's such a team effort, and if the team isn't aligned,
That's smart.
yeah, we've had that before where there's not the alignment, and it's very challenging, where like we have made the decision and it wasn't necessarily the right one, where this was definitely working better.
And in a team situation like that, team interviewing, how often has a team member picked up on something that you or someone
Yes.
else may have missed?
Yeah,
And it gives you a chance to relook at that,
yeah.
and
Yeah.
process that, assess that,
So that's
So I would say that's a best practice for sure.
Yeah.
That's back to that hire smart, go slow to go fast,
My daughter's in the process of interviewing now. She's a professional in the software industry. And most of the companies she's interviewed do that. They do have her spend time with colleagues that
Yeah,
she would
nice.
interact with. But there's one company, she's had 5 interviews. And now they've hired her for a week to come in and do a presentation, and
Oh
I'm
my
going,
goodness.
is
Seems
that,
like a lot
I
of
never
work.
heard of that. Is that? I mean,
I've heard of it, but I think
Yeah.
that's just overwrought.
Yeah.
So do I.
And, the risk is too that she's gonna find a job with someone else who's,
Yeah.
more ready
She-
and.
Yeah.
Ready to hire.
Yeah, I would feel very, if I was being called in for the 4th interview, and I would probably say, is this the last one? And if they said no, that would start to turn me off.
Yeah.
Yes. To
Yeah,
say,
I'm with you on
make up
that.
your, can you make a
Unfortunately,
decision?
she really likes the company.
Well,
Well, anyway,
hang in
okay.
there.
I never heard of 5 ever.
I've heard of 5 months making a decision, which is also
Yeah.
painful, but,
Yeah,
I don't know, Nick, or if folks are online yet have anything that, questions or things to share.
no questions are shared online.
Something that we've struggled with is and resonated with me, what you said was picking the wrong rewards. In the past, we have assumed that team members would want to do something, put together an activity or take them somewhere and do something, and
You find out later that they didn't care.
So I really like the idea of being a little more intentional about communicating with the team and sort of letting the team come up with ideas that
Yeah, we
feel a
just,
little more invested.
Yeah, even better.
Yeah.
That's a good idea.
we actually
together.
just did that. We actually just had the team decide,
For the-
yeah, we're all going to decade. So like, yeah, it's just one of those things where it's just like, what do you all want to do for this occasion that we're not celebrating necessarily? Someone is leaving that we really care for. She's moving out of the area. So that's also just like letting them decide what the party for that person would be like versus like the other teammate, versus us just being like, we're having a pretty standard, like, see you later kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so they got to decide and pick it, and that was, I think, is gonna be good.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
great ideas. I don't know, Nick, if you have anything, questions or anything you want to share?
in the past, like we were saying, retaining employees. For us, it's kind of one of those things, we have a contract with CTC, so it's kind of one of those things, we get them right out of high school.
Mhm.
And then we give them some of them leave within the first 6 months, some of them stick around for a year, maybe a year and a half, but it's kind of one of those things, we're with the school system, which that we get them 1 to 2 days a week. And then all of a sudden, it's like their point, like, okay, oh, we're leaving, we found something else. And trying to find people that are older and more settled, yeah, stable, stable to stick around.
Yeah, more clear about what they.
Yeah,
do.
and but most of the times, like you guys said, it's the pay. Like we're a small business, it's only me, my dad, and 2 other people, so we have to be very careful of how much we don't want to go over or be under what they want. We should try to get that happy medium to stick, and then
Yeah.
eventually down the road they have to make. For us, it's our 90-day probation period.
Mhm.
So they get past that, then we sit down and talk like, okay, hey, this is what we can do. This is what, like, some of the things that they need to work on, and they choose to stick around. Sometimes they don't, sometimes they do, so.
Okay, so I hope, again, you're already doing some of the things that we talked
Mhm.
about.
Yeah.
So perhaps there's some enhancements that you could implement, to drive that a little more intentionally, but even with the young people, do you find that some of them do stay?
They say, oh yeah, we'll stick around, and they'll call off like on a Friday. And then we get them on a Monday, they come back Monday and they call off Tuesday, like, and then it's practice, and it's like, okay, it's like, and then they don't show up.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And it's hard to track them down
It's
to get
not
all the
working.
paperwork and stuff, then it's like, okay. He's coming, we have a release form that they sign when they terminate. So it's kind of one of those things, hard to track them down, and at that point, it's like, oh yeah, I've been working here since I was off. And we ran into that last year with somebody.
Mhm.
He got hurt, and the next thing you know, he never showed back up. So,
Some of them just
happens.
disappear
Yeah.
into the ether. You know nothing.
Yeah, I guess.
None the wiser, but. Well, anything else for the good of the order?
Very helpful.
Good information.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Yeah, really.
it's been helpful, and I will, my contact information is in the presentation, and for anybody even who reviews this later, the recording, would welcome additional questions, feel free to email me with those questions or concerns. Happy to help.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.